grandson, they were just tearing up, and you could see the community really trying to support them virtually, but it was still very moving when I saw that and everything, because he was very well known in the community.
Yeah, the thing I was kind of semi-smiling about and semi-feeling so bad about the situation is, one is that at least people are able to do something together,
Right.
So that's something for the spirit. I mean, the worst thing I've been seeing is people, I mean, we all know there's these situations going on now where they can't even say goodbye to their loved ones.
Right.
I mean, how hard? I mean, it's like, oh my God. I mean, it's like unfathomable to think about something like that. So, at least with these virtual ways of doing this, as awkward as it is, as weird as it is, I'm sorry, it's bizarre. Right. We've all of a sudden moved from a regular life into this like virtual existence right now, and all these things that are developing. It's you got to take a deep breath and you got to think about it. I mean, because it's deep. I mean, I don't think some people are thinking about it as deeply as they should, but this is a big, big like turning point in life and the world and society. And it may continue to evolve this way for a while, and hopefully it won't. But I mean, I'd like to get back to the other way we were living.
Yeah.
But
how do you think it's going to impact people in terms of the long range? Do you think that people will, how do you think it's going to impact? Like, I've even heard speculation as to what it's going to do for the sports world. I'm a big fan of certain football teams and certain basketball teams and things of that nature. And folks are wondering, will we come back to that?
It's interesting.
And even performances.
Yeah. It's interesting you asked that. Well, once again, photographers are going to be immensely impacted by this, because unless they have concerts, which I can't see them having, sort of like they were talking about having NBA games with no crowd.
Okay.
But you can't put all the players of the team together, because if one guy has it and he's always a carrier of the virus, then he could infect his teammates. So you can't have that. But on the other hand, there was a big breaking news story last week that Chris Hayes on MSNBC talked about, and I'm amazed that this hasn't gotten more publicity than it has, is about the wrestling world. I mean, they're having live WWE wrestling with just wrestlers and no crowd every Monday.
Oh, wow.
In Florida.
I hadn't heard that. I had not heard that at all, but I was talking to a friend of mine. We actually serve on a board together, or served on a board, and they were asking me about some board representation and getting involved on the board again. But they're part of a political activist group. But they were telling me that in Shanghai, in the Disney Shanghai, that they just recently reopened that, but that they're requiring them to have check the temperature when you come in, the QR code that I think checking certain things and things of that nature. And of course, everybody that's going in there has to wear a mask. But I think that's the first Disney property that's opened around the country, but that's the one in Shanghai. And that was actually kind of like one of the focal points when this whole thing started. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But that's how they're doing it. They're doing everything from QR codes and things of that nature.
It is. But, to answer your question about how I think it's going to impact everything, I mean, I think, the economy is going to be in shambles for a while. I mean, there's just no way to recoup the types of losses that are going to be felt in a short term to recoup, except in the long term, because it's going to take a lot of planning and strategy and everything else that's going to happen later in 2020. God help us, with the elections and everything else. Because I mean, when you think about it, I mean, the jolt that this is sending through the economy, from small businesses to medium-sized businesses to the biggest ones, everybody's moving at light speed right now, trying to figure out how to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we're literally reinventing the wheel virtually as we go right now. So I'm not an economics, major, but I do certainly feel that this is going to be a very difficult road ahead. And I think that the number one thing, more than any, I worked with a platform called Life Reimagine about 7 years, it's been 7 years now. 7 years ago, I started working with AARP. And I was working with AARP because they started a platform called Life Reimagine. And Life Reimagine was exactly what it sounds like. It was about reimagining your life. So a great branding expert out there named Emilio Pardo, who was with them and now is with another company called Jackson. Emilio is a branding expert, and he's been around with the biggest people in the world. And they started this platform called Life Reimagined to teach people how to do just that, live with purpose and passion and reimagine your life, because many people were doing that in need of doing that as they get older. Either they've been downsized or there's something they wanted to do that they've never done. They got divorced maybe, and they wanted to reinvent themselves and reimagine their lives, whatever the circumstances may be. So I ended up working with them. And because of that, that's what made me think about incorporating some of that feel to my show, the Spin It Social show, when we talk about some aspects that I always bring in about, I asked the photographers who are on, like Estras Suarez, who was on this past week. He started his own EMS photo adventures thing. He's also very entrepreneurial with his yoga business. You know, this is a trained photojournalist that's won 2 Pulitzers. And he's reinventing himself many times over to do things and still do his photography. So I find that fascinating because the buck doesn't stop with photography. There's so many things that have evolved in photography that it's no longer just about photography. Now, that is the focus, pardon the pun once again, that is the core of their existence, but they need to tap into their inner passions and desires and evolve, just like we all do. So I was talking to another great photographer the other day who I'm going to have on one day. His name is Peter Da Silva. Peter's in San Francisco, in the California area. He's a phenomenal, classically trained photographer, uses cameras that most people wouldn't even see or know of in this lifetime. Old, classic cameras, and doing wet plates and this and that and other stuff that I even have to study up on before I talk to him, because I don't know all of that stuff. But I know some basics about it. But he's a phenomenally skilled photographer, and he's in many ways going to talk about business and other stuff too, because he's got things that he's going to have to do a little differently and stuff. So I find that a really interesting part of the conversation of what I started, you know?
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I have so many friends, they get cameras. Of course, I know you talked even with one of your guests about this. It might have been Miss Roy, but I don't remember. It might be one of the other ones. But everybody's got camera phones. Everybody's got the different kind of ways of doing photography, which means that everybody thinks they're a photographer. So just as one that is an actual professional photographer, how do you let folks know that it's great for them to capture their pictures, but at times they might want an actual professional photographer, because everybody's got their camera phone? So I know even when we've done events at the Hayti Center, which is one of my cultural arts centers that I work at, everybody pull out their camera, taking pictures, and they're not always the greatest pictures. Yeah,
I always tell people our smartphones are great. I mean, I use my Samsung S10 religiously for 90% of my photography. But when I want a absolutely glorious, solid portrait of somebody, or I want a really high-res photo, I break out my big boy camera, my Samsung NX10, which has a 18-50 2.8 lens, really sharp, really great, great depth, great focal range on it, and the files are huge. So I use my Samsung for 90% of the stuff I do, and it takes phenomenal photos. But there are those cases where if you want to step up to the plate with some other things, including really solid portraits and things like that, then of course you want to have a really good pro camera too. Most of them these days, a lot of them that are being developed are now mirrorless, a whole new technology, but really solid. They're developing more and more of those now, so they're full frame. When they first came out, they weren't full frame, but now a lot of them are. So that's a good thing. But I will say this: the video on the smartphones are my Samsung S10. The video is phenomenal. I cannot get over how solid, how clear, audio and visual that the video aspect is of the Samsung S10. It just knocks my socks off. Just
so
amazing.
in that sense, you think that it's just as good as maybe some of the professional quality with video, as opposed to maybe the regular photography.
No, I won't say that because, listen, there are cameras out there that you'll never get with a phone what you get with these cameras.
Right.
The digital Leicas, the digital high-level Canons and Nikons that shoot how many frames per second and the depth on it and everything else. No, you won't get the same thing. But you have to think about it. I won't keep using percentages here. I get myself in trouble with that sometimes. But a large amount of people that are using their smartphones to the exceptional quality that they have are what? Think about it. They're using it for social media, right? You don't need those huge files. Now, if you're a professional, like let's start with a certain caliber professional who's hitting all the tabloids, all the magazines, all the newspapers and stuff, you need more than a smartphone.
Right.
Because you need speed, you need different lens range, focal length, you need all that stuff. So, and flash and lighting and all that. You can't always get that every single shot you get with a smartphone.
Right.
You'll get good stuff, but not that. So yes, you need that. But for most of us, even me, my Samsung S10 is what I use because I want to get it right up on social most of the time. Right. And my phone takes great photos. I've sold many photos. I print 8x10s, 11x14s. They're actually off size because digital is different when you're printing it. But most of the time, I mean, I sell a lot of my prints and people are like, wow, those are gorgeous. Now, I took a photo about a year ago in Central Park I don't know if you heard about it, but there was the story about a duck that was in Central Park that was a mandarin duck.
I think I remember vaguely hearing about that.
Yeah, Mandy, the mandarin duck. And they don't know how this duck got to Central Park, but it's gorgeous. It's like the most beautiful duck you've ever seen. It's got like all these colors. Its feathers are just outrageously silky and gorgeous. And it's amongst all these other regular ducks in Central Park, you know? So it's like the superstar duck.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so ducks are some...
Huh?
I said ducks are somewhat superstars around North Carolina because they're actually a protected animal here in North Carolina because we have so many running around our ponds and things of that nature that actually, if you hit one, you can technically be arrested and charged and things of that nature because it's a protected animal.
Right. Well, this duck, nobody knows how it got there, though. My guess, honestly, is that it escaped from some rich person's home on Park Avenue or Fifth Avenue. This is just my crazy theory. But I lived in New York long enough to see it all. So when people say, no, how could somebody have a duck in their apartment? I'm like, excuse me, a guy in Harlem had a tiger in his apartment once.
Wow. I never heard about that. A guy.
There was a story about 8-10 years ago. I used to document the NYPD. I documented the NYPD for 10 years. And I used to run around with the ESU units all the time. I didn't get lucky enough to be the person around the day that this tiger was in somebody's apartment in Harlem in the projects. But there was a photo in the Daily News and the Post and all these places because ESU got a call because the tiger, I guess, had let loose peeing or whatever and other stuff. And I think the story, if I remember correctly, I couldn't be making this up now, so it must be the story, that the guy's ceiling was getting wet below him.
Oh, wow.
And also people heard the growls and other things. So this guy had a zoo in his apartment.
He had a zoo in his apartment. Well, I can't talk. I remember many years ago, my one daily newspaper that I worked at was the Boca Raton News, and that was in the late 80s, 89. And I went and covered somebody that had the big whale-like animal that begins with an M.
A manatee?
A manatee was stuck in the house.
You got to be kidding me.
No, it's not. It was they had a beach house and they had like one of those little inlets that came a little bit toward the house. The manatee somehow managed to get in there and was stuck in the house. It wasn't stuck all the way in. It was like in the
Oh
porch
my
part
God.
of it. But yeah, the managing was sucked there.
Crazy.